I remember looking up at a sergeant as we lay after about the 15th of these incidents and saying, "Do you ever feel like the Redcoats?"
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most shocking revelations made by government insiders.
Ignorance is bliss, they say, but to actually know what they were doing, you can't stand by and let that happen.
Mass NSA surveillance post 9/11.
You used to be able to just drive up to an airport, get out of your car, basically get a ticket and get on board. That dramatically changed after 9/11.
When a national emergency occurs, no one thinks that the pitfalls will land directly on the affected citizens. After the attacks on September 11, 2001, the Protect America Act was passed, giving organizations like the NSA permission to track Americans and foreigners alike without warrant. This quickly led to the creation of PRISM, a program dedicated to collecting natives' web data.
There is no question that the President and I and others in government have actually learned of some things that have been happening in many ways on an automatic pilot. And yes, in some cases, it has reached too far inappropriately.
In 2013, it was exposed by Edward Snowden, a former NSA employee, and quickly became a national story. He not only revealed exactly how it worked, but what exactly it stole. From searching through people's private messages to spying on World of Warcraft players, it made it clear just how far the government was willing to go to stop potential terrorists.
A sense of why did you decide to do what you've done?
So for me, it all comes down to state power against the people's ability to meaningfully oppose that power. And I'm sitting there every day getting paid to design methods to amplify that state power.
NSA tracking American citizens pre-9/11.
If these private people were holding a conversation and used keywords that is in the computer's dictionary, then that individual would become a target. Yes, all you have to do is key the computer and you are now a target.
Although the Snowden revelations put modern U.S. government surveillance in the spotlight, it wasn't the first time it had happened. In the 1960s, the Cold War prompted officials to create Echelon, a program to observe the USSR and its allies. This spiraled into something much larger and was soon being used to collect global satellite data. The network was even capable of accessing phone calls and other forms of correspondence.
Everyone eavesdrops on everyone else, so no one can denounce their neighbor.
It was Perry Felwak, an NSA analyst, who came forward about the tracking stations placed around the world. His leaks led to the Church Committee being passed in 1973, which ensured that American citizens wouldn't be spied on. Unfortunately, that was amended less than 30 years later following 9/11 and hasn't been fixed since.
The advantage for the USA is not necessarily being able to eavesdrop on the whole world, but rather to make other countries dependent, while encouraging them never to attempt to develop their own system.
The Sand Creek Massacre.
The Southern Cheyenne lost perhaps half of their population. So Bent's Fort became a place of sadness where too many deaths occurred.
Whistleblowers aren't a modern concept. They've existed throughout history, even in some countries' adolescence. During the American Frontier Wars in 1864, Captain Silas Soule and his men were ordered to carry out a gruesome attack against a peaceful Native American encampment. Soule not only refused to take part in it, but heavily insulted anyone who would.
Soule's company of 1st Colorado veterans refused to fire a shot.
Though the Sand Creek Massacre still unfortunately took place and led to the violent deaths of hundreds of innocent people, Soule refused to stand by. He appeared in court to testify during an investigation of the act, which eventually led to the offending colonel resigning from his position. His good deed wasn't without sacrifice, as he was assassinated only 2 months later.
And so they returned to Denver as heroes, and their parade through Denver was about 2 miles long.
Business leaders planning a coup against President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Who in the hell has done all the bleeding for this country and for this law and this Constitution anyhow but you fellas?
What could have been a disastrous moment in American history was stopped by one man's convictions. President Franklin Roosevelt was an economically progressive president, something that immediately unsettled businessmen nationwide.
The purpose, as I've told you, sir, is to lead this nation properly in this time of economic crisis. There's a cripple in the White House. Roosevelt is weak. We'd like you to speak on behalf of the veterans and new leadership.
This led to the business plot being created, a coup that would overturn the election results and instate Smedley Butler as the de facto leader. It was Butler himself who ended up coming forward about the insidious plan, even revealing that his attempt would be bankrolled and padded with 500,000 former U.S. soldiers. His efforts were met with denials from those who were accused, leading to a heated debate that was encouraged by the media. Though no proof had been shown, the committee in charge of investigating the claims has insisted they're true.
They assumed that he would be anathema to some of the governmental changes that were going on, and they assumed that he would keep a secret. And they were wrong.
CIA's involvement in Indonesian killings of 1965 and 66.
And the most important part of this story, no, not the first event in the tale, is the U.S.-backed mass murder of approximately 1 million innocent civilians in Indonesia in 1965.
Some accusations are quelled before they can even reach a national audience. This was the case for Ralph Miggehy, a past officer for the CIA who came forward about several of their alleged transgressions. One such claim made in 1981 purported that they had been involved in a series of mass killings in Indonesia throughout the 1960s, leading to the deaths of at least 500,000 accused communists.
I feel that I am doing what I should be doing, and in that sense I'm happy. I am not happy in the sense that no amount of criticism of the agency, no amount of revelation of his dirty deeds, no amount of exposure of the weaknesses of the agency has weakened the CIA.
He even considered it to be a prototype for an American-supported 1973 coup in Chile. The leak was heavily censored by the CIA, resulting in a legal battle between them, Miggehy, and the ACLU. While the former was ultimately victorious, his allegations were a small look into the extent of the government's foreign interference.
Tetapi kita harus menumpas mereka. Kalau mereka itu melakukan, kita minta mereka itu di bumi hanguskan, tetapi dengan tidak cara-cara seperti yang kita lakukan seperti tadi, kan gitu. Itu jauh dari nilai-nilai kemanusiaan.
The truth about the Vietnam War.
I learned in the Marine Corps that to know what's happening, you have to be up at the front line.
Even when it was ongoing, many considered the war in Vietnam to be senseless. And this reveal only strengthened that position. The Pentagon Papers, copied and originally circulated by Daniel Ellsberg in the early 1970s, made it clear just how far the government was willing to go in order to ensure victory.
I can no longer cooperate in concealing this information from the American public.
Ellsberg, you have any concern about the possibility of going to prison for this?
Wouldn't you go to prison to self-fund this war?
It leaked everything from the insidious goals of the United States to the bombings and raids they carried out that had never once been reported on. It even exposed several planned attacks that hadn't come to fruition, and a coup that had, leading to the assassination of President Diem and the reinstatement of an American-approved choice. The publication spanned several presidential administrations, exposing them in a way they had never been before.
Ellsberg was tense but composed as attorneys protested the government request for $100,000 bail. Ellsberg himself assured the court he would appear whenever and wherever asked.
Torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib.
أو يسمعنا أصوات غريبة بالحاكي أو سماعة ما يخلينا ننام نهائيا يعني يوميا أو يطلع اثنين أو ثلاثة يعني أو اثنين أو واحد يعذبه يخليه يصرخ للصبح.
Unfortunately, not all that served do so with good intentions. During the Iraq War, the army remodeled a former prison run by Saddam Hussein into one for their own purposes. They then proceeded to imprison anyone they felt would pose a threat to themselves or the country as a whole. They were then given clearance to interrogate through any means possible, including acts of torture.
There is no such thing as a little bit of torture.
The prisoners at Abu Ghraib were put through physical, psychological, and sexual abuse, which was even photographed by the perpetrators. Some even depicted soldiers posing next to a corpse. These images were first brought to light by Joe Darby in 2004, whose good deed was rewarded with doxing and constant threats from his own countrymen.
Once they were brought in, once this investigation began, were they removed from the base?
No. They still had their weapons. They still had unlimited access to the facility and me the whole time, for almost a month.
War crimes and human rights violations in the Middle East.
U.S. Army video filmed in 2007
showed a group of men, almost all unarmed, being gunned down in a Baghdad street by an American Apache helicopter.
While technically a crime, what Chelsea Manning did shone a light on war crimes committed by her own country. In 2009, she received access to a plethora of classified information and quickly found evidence of war crimes being committed in the Middle East. The files, which were then sent to WikiLeaks, contained damning evidence, ranging from footage of a deadly 2007 airstrike carried out in Baghdad to the revelation of countless civilians being murdered by United States troops.
There was no correct option. There was only the least incorrect one. Either way, I would have been screwing somebody over.
These leaks ultimately led to her arrest and imprisonment, and she was even looking at a potential death sentence for aiding the enemy, with her sentence eventually being commuted in 2017. While controversial, her act has led to some people seeing the military in a new light.
I'm just somebody who figured out what was going on. And then once I thought about it, I'm like, now I can't unthink it.
My Lai massacre cover-up.
People were getting killed and wounded, and we weren't receiving any fire. Just, it didn't make sense. There was too many casualties there.
The country's goals surrounding the Vietnam War haven't been the only things to be exposed. One event carried out by the United States government has gone on to live in infamy to this day: the horrific My Lai massacre. Perpetrated in 1968, hundreds of Vietnamese citizens were rounded up and slaughtered with a wide array of weapons.
As a professional soldier, I had been taught to carry out the orders, and at no time it ever crossed my mind to disobey or to refuse to carry out an order that was issued by my superiors.
One soldier, Hugh Thompson Jr., attempted to stop this act and even reported it, only for it to be covered up and explained away as an accident. It wasn't until 1969, when Ronald Rittenhauer came forward with everything he'd been told about the mass killings, namely that they had been planned and ordered by commanding officers, that the truth began to be reported.
I wanted to see action taken. I wanted to see the people who are responsible arrested. I think that the people who are primarily responsible have not been arrested. I think the people who are being arrested now are merely the pawns of the game.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Infecting African American citizens with syphilis.
None of them were treated with effective panaceas, none of their families were ever warned, and none consented to take part in what is now known as the Tuskegee syphilis experiment.
There are some studies so vile it's hard to believe they took place. Yet from 1932 to 72, Tuskegee University used the guise of free medical care to leave hundreds of African American men infected with syphilis. The afflicted participants were never told of their diagnosis, leaving them in the dark while they were treated with toxic materials.
They won't tell you nothing. Just tell you, come and roll your sleeve up.
The scientists involved even prevented the men from receiving actual care. When Peter Buxton first learned of this in 1965, he tried to report it, only to be brushed aside. He finally leaked what he knew in 1972, immediately making headlines across the nation. It was only then that the experiment was finally called off, but the damage done caused generational trauma that's still felt today.
We'll give them aspirin and tonic and vitamins, things they've never had before. I guarantee you they'll feel much, much better.
Until they don't.
Which whistleblower do you think exposed the most shocking leak? Let us know in the comments below. Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.